When I was in high school, there was a boy named Patrick, though that wasn't his real name. No one wanted to use his real name, actually. Patrick was strange beyond the usual teen awkwardness, claiming to be a demon and threatening that he could summon himself if his name was spoken 3 times. It was absurd, of course, but something about him just felt wrong. He wore the same faded gray hoodie every day, smelling of stale fabric, and a pair of dark sunglasses he never removed, not even indoors. He walked through the halls like a shadow, saying little but always watching. One day, Patrick decided I was adopted. He did this to a select few of us, announcing to those he liked that they were safe. We all brushed it off as another strange quirk, but he'd appear suddenly out of nowhere, always when we spoke of him. When he didn't like someone, though, well, those people avoided him just in case. One autumn afternoon, I was with some friends behind the school, joking about him. We used a nickname to avoid saying his name outright, but at some point we slipped. Patrick came up in conversation 3 times. Then, as if materializing from nowhere, he stood on top of the dugout with a baseball bat staring down us silent. The eerie grin under his hood made my blood run cold. We stopped laughing and tried to ignore him, but he stayed, watching us with that unnerving gaze before slipping away into the shadows. After that day, I noticed something odd. The few times friends and I did say his name 3 times, he'd show up soon after. The worst encounter was during a sleepover at my friend Laura's house. We were talking in her room, discussing Patrick. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel uneasy mentioning his name, but I did anyway. And not 10 minutes later, we heard Laura's front door slam. Startled, we ran downstairs to find Patrick standing in her living room, talking calmly to her mother. When her mother asked why he was there, he simply replied, "I was summoned." She brushed it off as harmless, but Laura and I could barely make eye contact the rest of the night. Another time, a friend named Johnny taunted us for believing Patrick's summoning curse. We begged him not to, but he insisted, repeating Patrick's name aloud 3 times. To our horror, Patrick showed up, staring at us from the edge of Johnny's yard before silently disappearing into the night. Johnny was pale and shaken afterward, convinced we had set him up. The last time I encountered Patrick was the worst. I was home alone on a rainy night when a boy I'd been seeing mentioned Patrick's name. I told him the story, but he just laughed, calling it ridiculous, and then shouted Patrick's name 3 times. Almost immediately, the rain intensified. Thunder clapped, and through my window I saw someone standing in my driveway, a shadowed figure just staring. I was sure it was Patrick. My heart raced as I scrambled to lock every door. But when I looked outside again, he was gone. The next morning, I found Patrick's gray hoodie folded neatly at the edge of my yard, with some of my belongings inside it, items I hadn't realized were missing. I never saw Patrick again after that, but sometimes I feel like I'm being watched. I wonder if he's out there somewhere waiting for someone to say his name. One winter night, my friend Mike and I were on our way to a dinner party. The snow was coming down harder than expected, covering the roads in a thick white blanket. As we drove, we spotted a car in the middle of the street, hazard lights flashing through the falling snow, both doors open. Mike urged me to stop, but I was hesitant. Something felt off. Still, we pulled over. For a few moments, we just sat in silence, watching the empty car. I felt a gnawing anxiety as I stared into the dark, shadowy interior. Mike, impatient with my hesitation, got out to investigate, and as he approached the car, I thought I saw movement in the back seat. My heart stopped. I slammed on the horn, startling Mike, who looked back at me confused. But he got the message and sprinted back to our car. We drove away in silence, tension thick between us. At the party, we tried to brush off the strange encounter, but hours later, the evening news came on. A woman had been carjacked by men hiding in an abandoned car on a snowy road, just like the one we'd passed. My blood ran cold as I realized how close we had come to being victims. To this day, I rarely stop to help strangers, especially in situations that don't feel quite right. That night changed me and left me questioning the intentions behind every encounter on the road. When I was around 10, my family often spent summers at my grandparents' beachfront property. Those summers were filled with laughter, beach games, and the endless company of relatives. My favorite relative by far was my Uncle Joseph, a psychiatrist with a gentle smile who listened like no one else. I often shared things with him that I didn't share with anyone else. That summer, though, I started having nightmares, disturbing dreams that left me terrified. In one dream, I was abandoned, left alone in the house with no one to turn to. I told Uncle Joseph, who listened intently, a worried look in his eyes. He told me it sounded like I was harboring resentment toward my parents and encouraged me to act out, to express my frustration. It felt strange, but he was the adult. He knew best. Following his advice, I started arguing with my parents, behaving out of character. But my nightmares only worsened, and Uncle Joseph suggested a final solution, something to set my mind free. One night, after waking from a particularly vivid nightmare, I heard whispering close to my ear. I turned and saw Uncle Joseph by my bed, whispering softly. I screamed, and he bolted from the room. Horrified, I told my parents everything, and my father confronted him. What he found in Uncle Joseph's bag was sickening notes on nightmares, inducing fear, even hypnotic suggestions. Uncle Joseph vanished from our lives after that night, but the memories linger. I still can't sleep without wondering if, somewhere in the dark, someone is watching, waiting to unlock my deepest fears again.